Welcome to the Radio Horror Show here on the YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this maybe at the broadcast, we're talking about Phantom of the Opera tonight, as it is the 20 it is 2025, and Phantom of the Opera, the original, came out in 1925, so 100 years ago. The original Phantom of the Opera came out based on the original novel. And we'll also be talking about tonight the other Phantom of the Opera, which is the 1943 version, just to kind of keep it in the vein of like where the older films. And then there'll be a second part to this where I talk about the film Opera by Dario Argento and the 1980s Phantom of the Opera with Robert Englund, and then a third part which will be covering the more recent one with Joel Schumacher. And joining me for this anniversary of one of cinema's greatest films ever made, Mark, introduce yourself.
Yeah. Mark the Movie Man, as I go by on YouTube, and that. Been doing YouTube 19 years, podcasting. This will be our 12th year now, and just love movies. And thanks for having me on.
So the anniversary of this film was actually in November of this year, but people have been kind of already, covering it and celebrating it now. But yes, November 15th, 1925 in the United States is when it came out. And it was a big deal for Universal Studios because the silent film era had been dominated by the Germans, and it seemed like us Americans really wanted to get in on it.
Yeah, yeah, we did. And what a way to come into it with this film. I got a chance to talk to last year for the 99th anniversary. I got to talk with Anastasia Elfman, who is the wife of Richard Elfman, the director of Forbidden Zone and such. And she's a huge fan of Lon Chaney, and she is a big fan of Phantom of the Opera. And so we got to talk about it, and it's just impressive, this film and what went into it. And when you watch it from 100 years ago, it still actually stands up today as far as storytelling, pacing, what it does. It is, you can, if you watch it once, you can see why this is a classic, even though it's a silent film. I think it's probably one of the best versions, if not the best version still.
And the film stars Lon Chaney as the Phantom, or Eric, Mary Philbin as Christina Day, Norman Kerry as Victom, Raoul de Chagny, Arthur Edmund Carraway as Ledoux, Gibson Gowland as Simon Bouquet, John St. Paulus as Kamat, Philip de Chagny, Stitz Edwards as Florina Papillon, and Mary Fabian as Carolette. And then there's another guest, Carolette, as well in a 1929 re-edit version. The directors of the film, there were three directors according to IMDb, which I always thought was funny. But I think Rupert Julian is the best known director of this
Mhm.
film.
Yeah. Rupert is the one that a lot of people reference when they talk about this movie. So, and they may have three because either the scope of this film, or it may have, especially if there was a 29 re-edit, may accredit the director for doing the re-edit possibly.
And
Back then, it's really hard to tell.
right, did you ever read the novel that the Phantom of the Opera is based on?
I did not, but while looking up in details on this, there was actually a 1916 version of this film, Phantom of the Opera, but that was lost. They figure it either got misplaced or lost by the original studio. I forgot it was done in Europe. There was a version before this one, but apparently that is unfortunately lost to the wind.
And this is also not to be confused with, of course, the Phantom, which would
Yes.
debut in 1936. The pulp hero action comic strip character, which still is being printed in newspapers to today.
Played by Billy Zane in 19, the 90 or 88? I forgot which.
The 90s.
90s, yeah, it was the 90s, played by Zahn, Billy Zahn, excuse me. Yeah, that one it was interesting. So,
But the Phantom of the Opera original novel was written by Gaston Leroux, I think his name is pronounced.
hmm hmm
And this was about 15 years before the movie would be made. Um, set in 1880s Paris. The film does follow a lot of what the Phantom of the Opera book had, but definitely made its changes when it came to like how the Phantom looked, and its ending, and other things. Obviously, everyone always talks about the incredible makeup job done by Lon Chaney, which was done himself. He pulled his nose back and pulled his face back to give it this like etching of like a skull. Just doing some of the craziest makeup works ever. Things that nobody has ever seen, done today.
Yeah, it's impressive that he did that himself, and it looks great. It's one of those iconic scenes when we get the reveal, and it's actually pretty dang creepy, even for today's standards. It looks really good. It looks a lot better, in all honesty, than the 43 version of the Phantom when we get the reveal of him. I like the 25 version better.
When was the first time you saw this?
Oh, the original Phantom? I don't know. It was done by one of those horror hosts way back when I was a kid in Milwaukee when we used to have independent TV channels and they were looking for programming. So like afternoon on a Sunday, they'd have a shock theater or whatnot, and they'd have a horror host who'd play public domain movies. And this was one of the ones that they played. And when I was a kid, I thought it was pretty cool. It was silent. I'm like, oh, it's silent, but it was pretty cool. I've watched it multiple times since then and really grown an appreciation for it and what it's doing, especially for it being made 100 years ago. The stuff that they do in it is actually quite impressive.
One of the things I think was definitely heavily influenced by the Phantom in terms of characters is like V for Vendetta.
Oh, yeah.
Considering the ending of this movie, you have Christine. Um, Christine and Raoul elope together at the end of the movie, and Eric is not necessarily like destroyed by a mob in the book, whereas at the end of this movie he is. But Christine returns to Eric's lair per his request to return the ring and buries him somewhere he will never be found. And the newspaper just declares Eric is dead. And they never this film it's a mob mentality that takes Eric away, and then it has such an abrupt ending. There's a lot of dark humor in this film that I definitely didn't find in the novel. One of the things is like when Eric has the his hand, and everyone thinks it's possibly like maybe some type of incinerator device. I don't know if they even had grenades back then, but he holds his hand up and then reveals there's nothing in it as he keeps everyone at bay, and it's a big laugh for him. He asks her to never remove his mask, and he is like born disfigured. I think later versions it made it seem like it was acid that was thrown in his face, but he was actually born disfigured. I can't speak for the Andrew Lloyd Webber version as well, if they had a big explanation about why he is the way he is. But the idea of the Phantom of the Opera, this imposing, possibly supernatural being living in the opera and terrorizing people, has always had this very spooky kind of gothic ghost story about it. Unlike years before, when Washington Irving wrote the Adventures of Sleepy Hollow, which is you think of the headless horseman galloping down upon you at night. The Phantom of the Opera definitely has that same kind of nightmarish figure about him.
Yeah, he is up there with the Headless Horseman, absolutely. And he's handled so much more in 1925 version. He's handled so much like a horror character. I mean, in later version, I don't know how much you want to get into it now, but with the 43 version, they really changed things up. But in the original, he's true horror character. He's a guy who haunts this opera house. People talk about him, see whispers and flashes of him from the corner of their eye, but he usually manages to stay out of sight. Or he's so creepy that they build this mythos about him to where nobody wants to interact with him, even if they do see him from behind or whatnot. They know opera booth he's always regularly frequenting to watch the performers. But no one ever wants to go in there, they say, because they're too scared. And that's before we even see his face. He's just this haunting character, and you can see watching this where that influence of haunting a location or a historic area comes from, for sure. And his downfall ends up being the love he develops for someone, for a woman, ends up being his downfall.
This opera house that they had to film in was one of the most majestically beautiful settings ever. It was shot on stage 23, and it was known as the Phantom of the Opera soundstage, and was originally built for the 25 film and reused in the 43 film. So how they constructed this whole thing to make it look like this authentic looking opera house in Paris was astonishing for the time period. Nobody had ever attempted anything like this before. And the budget on this entire film was $2 million, which was incredible for 1924 when it was shot. 2025.
That is insane. I didn't realize it was that much for back then. That is an insane amount of money. But yeah, you're right. With building all of the sets, very intricate artwork on them. When you get to the masquerade scene, they have this huge staircase that they've built, which people, where action is taking place. And that thing is just ornate and just massive when you see these are actual people. I mean, we're 25, so we're not talking animated or stick figures, real people. That stage was, that stairway was massive. So I can see where the budget went. It's just impressive that they decided to spend that much money back then, even for a film like this.
And since I'm not an expert in the silent film era, I can't talk too much about like how the actors would act because their acting is what it was at the time. I don't know if they delivered their dialogue for this film and it was just obviously there was no sound for it. But the music for this film was done by Gustav Hinrichs, I believe. He had a long career in the theater going back into the 1880s, all the way through the beginning of the silent film era. He wrote and arranged the orchestral accompaniments for many Universal Studio films. And it was his score for the Phantom of the Opera that was basically done at the last minute to get it in time for the screenings of the film in 1925. It wasn't ready for the premiere, but the general release of the audiences got to hear this orchestral, absolutely incredible music, which I think out of all the versions of the Phantom of the Opera holds up the best until, of course, we get to Andrew Lloyd Webber's version, which is just an absolute incredible musical. I've played the music on my show quite many a time. I've never seen I've never seen the play on Broadway stage or in a Boston theater, but a local college did it, and they spent over $500,000 to do the production. Their plays are raised by the attendance of the audience and donations. Obviously, the theater department probably has tuition for the college that goes to it as well. But they told us it cost over $600,000 to put on Phantom of the Opera. Now, the production value was insane. I can also imagine that trying to get Andrew Lloyd Webber's copyright script is incredibly expensive as well.
Yeah, that licensing alone is going to be tough. That probably was very pricey and part of that price tag, but that's impressive they spent it on that much. But
definitely,
especially for a college production, I was involved in the college production here, working craft work on for 1776 for in town here for the college that I went to. Stevens Point, and that was an impressive production, and they put a lot of work into that, and that was a lot of investment as well. But I mean, you put the money in, you get it out. At least back then, especially in 25, I mean, they didn't have films coming out every single weekend or whatnot. So these were investments of time and money. So it is impressive amount of money, but if you think about how many films they were actually probably making at the time, overall they probably could afford it okay. But it pays off because the production design, it still holds up today. The sets in the 1925 version are amazing. even in black and white, especially if you get a highly restored version of the Phantom, if you can find one, you get to see the detailed work that they put into all of these sets, from just the river of water, the lake underneath the opera house,
Right.
to the stage itself, to the chandelier. You know?
Oh, let me go over the plot line for the original 25 film, and then I'm going to go over the plot line for the 42 film, and we'll just see how they compare and contrast. And we'll talk about Claude Rains' performance in this film, which definitely is, I think, one that gets overlooked quite often. But you can, I think it's more of commercially available sometimes based on the fact it's packed in with like the Blu-ray box sets for the Universal Monster films. And it's the only Universal Monster film that has its own standalone film, whereas like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolfman, The Mummy, they all had sequels.
Yeah.
At the Paris Opera House, Comte Philip de Chagny and his brother attend a production of Faust, where their sweetheart Christina may sing. Rao wishes for Christina to resign and marry him, and she prioritizes her career over their relationship. Very, very forward thinking on the writer's part with this. The woman wants her career to come before her basically be just putting out children, because
Yeah.
I mean that's all she would be doing at home is just being a housewife. Meanwhile, the former manager has sold the opera house. While leaving, they tell the new managers about the opera ghost Phantom, who is the occupant of box number 5. Um, uh, 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 Carolette receives a letter that the Phantom demanding that Christina replacing her the following night, threatening dire consequences if this does not happen. In Christina's dressing room, a voice tells her she must take Caroletta's place and think only of her career and her master. Of course, the Phantom is calling her his master already, which I watched this with somebody and they thought it was extremely problematic. And I didn't quite understand like why was he her master? I digress. The following day, Christina reveals to Rao that she has been tutored by a mysterious voice, the spirit of music. It is now impossible to stop her career. Rao says someone is probably playing a joke on her and storms off in anger. That evening, Christina substitutes for Caroletta, and during the performances, the manager is startled to see, seated in box number 5, a figure who later disappears. Simon Beckett then finds the body of his brother, the stagehand, hanging by a noose and vows vengeance. Once again, a note from the Phantom demands Carletta says that she is ill and lets Christina replace her. The managers get a similar note reiterating that if Christina does not sing, they will present Faust in a cursed house. The following evening, the defiant Caroletta sings. During the performance, the Phantom drops the chandelier hanging from the ceiling, killing people. Christina enters a secret door behind the mirror in her dressing room, descending into the lower depths of the opera. She meets the Phantom, who introduces himself as Eric and declares his love. Christina fights, and he carries her to the underground, fabricated of her comfort. The next day, she finds a note from Eric telling her that she must never look behind his mask. Very strangely written, but that's okay. As he preoccupied playing his organ, Christina playfully tears off his mask, revealing his deformed face. Enraged, the Phantom declares she is now his prisoner, and she begs him to let her sing, and he relents, allowing her to visit the surface one last time, as she promises not to see Rao again. Released, Christina meets Rao at the annual mass ball where the Phantom appears disguised as the Red Death. On the roof of the opera house, Christina tells Rao about her experiences, and unbeknownst to him, the Phantom is listening nearby. Rao swears to risk Christina away to London following her next performance. The next night, during a performance, Christina is kidnapped, and Rao rushes to her dressing room to meet the man in the fez again. He is actually Inspector Ladeau, a secret policeman who has been tracking Eric, and he's escaped prisoner from the Devil's Island ward. After finding the secret door in Christina's room, the two men enter the Phantom's lair. The Phantom subjects Rao and Ledoux to intense heat, and then he locks them in barrels of gunpowder and causes the room to flood. Christina begs Eric to save her beloved, promising him anything in return, even becoming his wife. This causes the Phantom to save Rao and Ledoux. A mob led by Simon infiltrates Eric's lair, and they approach him. The Phantom tries to use a clever disguise in order to frighten everyone, but the mob takes him away, and Rao and Christina later go off to their honeymoon. So that's the plot line of the original film. I'm going to bring up what the plot line is of the next film in this series, which I only ever saw when it was like every year, like Walmart does these kind of box sets with like special covers that like glow in the dark.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was the first time I ever saw the version that's now behind me. I think that version's right side for you, right?
Yep, yep, yep. I see it. Yep.
That's the Claude Rains version. The
Yes.
plot line for that is violinist Eric Claudin is dismissed from the Paris Opera House after revealing that he is losing the use of his fingers on his left hand. Unbeknownst to the conductor, who assumes Claudin can support himself, the musician has used all his money to help anonymously fund voice lessons for Christine Dubas, a young soprano to whom he is devoted. In a desperate attempt to earn money, Claudette submits a piano concerto he has written for publication. After weeks of not hearing any response about his concerto, he becomes worried and returns to the publisher to ask about it. Pylea rudely tells him to leave. Claudette hears his concerto being played in the office and is convinced that Pylea is trying to steal it. Unbeknownst to him, a visiting Franz Liszt has been playing and endorsing the concerto. Enraged, Claudette strangles Pylea, and Georgetta, the publisher's assistant, throws etching acid in Claudin's face, horribly scarring him forever. Now wanted for murder, Claudin flees into the sewers of the opera and covers his disfigurement with a prop mask stolen from the opera house, thus becoming the Phantom. During a performance of the opera Amora et Gloria, the Phantom drugs a glass of red wine, which the prima donna mime by Carolina drinks, knocking her unconscious and asleep. The director pulls Christina in her place and she dazzles the audience with her singing. After some time, the opera's owner received a note demanding that Christina replace Baya Carolina. To catch the Phantom, Raoul comes up with a plan to not let Christina sing during her performance, to lure the Phantom out. Garin plans to have Litz play Claudin's concerto after the performance, but the Phantom strangles one of Raoul's men and heads to the auditorium's doming ceiling. He then brings down the large chandelier in the audience, causing chaos. As the audience and the crew flee, the Phantom takes Christina down underground. He tells Christina that he loves her and she'll now sing all she wants, but only for him. Raoul and the police begin pursuing them underground. Just as the Phantom and Christina arrive in the lair, they hear the orchestra playing the concerto, and the Phantom plays along with the melody on the piano orchestra. Christina watches, realizing the concerto was written around the melody of the lullaby she has known since childhood. Raoul and Antonio hear the Phantom playing and follow the sound. Overjoyed, the Phantom urges Christina to sing, which she does. While the Phantom is distracted by the music, Christina sneaks up and pulls off his mask, revealing his disfigured face. At that same moment, Raoul and Anatoly break in. Claudin grabs a sword and fights with the Phantom. Raoul fires his gun, but our Anatoly knocks Raoul's arm, and the shot hits the ceiling, causing a cave-in. Claudin is seemingly crushed to death by the falling rocks. Later, Anatoly Rao demand that Christine choose one of them. She surprises them by choosing to marry neither of them instead of choosing to pursue her singing career. Inspired by Claudin's devotion to her future, Anatoly and Raoul later go to dinner together. So they find love with each other, I guess.
No, it's joking. Ha. We'll just go to dinner without her. Ha ha. Not at all implying anything. Not at all implying.
I have gay friends that say otherwise.
Oh no, it totally is, but it's 1940, so 42 or 43, so you got your Hays Code in full effect, so they can't. Yeah, no, it's a bit implied between these two. So.
It's quite funny in this film that Christine is basically going to pursue her career no matter what, and she's not going to worry about getting married.
Right. Yeah. If you watch these two, which I did back to back, if you're looking for a good actual thriller, straight up horror thriller film, 1925 beats this one version hands down. The later version, the 43 version, because this one's a lot slower. This one gives you more background behind the Phantom, his motives. You get to introduce to him more, or the guy who becomes the Phantom. The chandelier scene happens way later. The reveal of his face happens even later than the original. And yeah, they're almost completely different films in every way. Your Phantom, some of the motivations of that are there, but as far as the story goes, this remake, I guess, if you want to call it that, if it is based on, is not really a horror film at all. It is more of a drama with horror elements in it, I would say, myself, especially comparing the two.
And did you know there was actually supposed to be a sequel to this movie? It was canceled.
Oh yeah, I mean the way they end it with that very well dressed shot of the collapsed stones and the the Phantom mask and that, and the way it's placed. It had that feel of sequel almost.
In this film, we also had Nielsen Addy as Antonio Guerin, Suzanne Foster as Christina DuBois, Claude Rains as Enrique Claudin, Eric Edgar Barrier as Raul Dabort, Leo Cariello as Signor Ferretti, Jane Farah as Bianca Caroli, J. Edward Bromberg as Amat, and Fritz Feld as Lacor. A lot of these actors I'm not too familiar with, but I think a lot of people would know Claude Rains as he
Yeah.
in the adventures of Robin Hood, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Casablanca. He was a Universal Monsters staple actor as well, having been in in a few of those films. Like probably the most well known is The Invisible Man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was a staple. He's a great actor, great character actor. Always enjoy seeing him on screen, and I liked him in this. I think he's one of the highlights of this version of the Phantom. And probably one of the better angles for it. But yeah, I mean, just the cast does fine in this newer version. I mean, they all are doing really well. I love their performances and everything, but just for me, the story is so much slower in this one. They, especially giving far more time to your Phantom character and learning more about him. I mean, here we have evidence yet again even in 43 of Hollywood feeling, oh, no, we've got to make you feel at least a little bit more for the quote unquote bad guy in this film, build some sympathy on his motivation and what drove him. And I'm like, I don't always need an explanation for my bad guys. And I think it takes away a little bit of that mystery and that fear with your Phantom in this version versus the original, which we know very little about him. And I think that makes him scarier.
This director only directed the one Universal Monster movie, but I pointed out that he had also been a director of The Addams Family for an episode, and he directed the original Maverick, which this was a TV series back in the 1950s and 60s, which was remade into a movie starring Mel Gibson in the early 1990s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that wasn't a bad movie, but that doesn't quite surprise me. I don't know how this version did at the box office, but I'm not sure it did as well as they maybe expected it to. But I couldn't say. I didn't get a chance to look that up.
Well, the original Phantom film did extremely well in terms of it's gross, if you could call it that. This movie cost about $1.75 million to make, and unfortunately in the United States it only made $1.6 million.
Yeah, so that's even though it may sound like, it made almost its money back, that's considered a flop in Hollywood terms.
Especially back then. Back then, if it broke even back then, that was a success still. Whereas today, it has to make a lot more because of how much money marketing and such. But I like the way that the Phantom looks in this movie, and this is where the whole thing about him getting the acid thrown in his face comes from, or him being like some kind of like opera singer or a writer that gets disfigured because of he finding out that someone stole something from him and he wants to put a stop to it, and so he seeks his revenge that way. Whereas in the original, he's just like, the original book, he's just just born disfigured, and ugly means evil kind of things. Whereas this is a revenge plot line, and there's no revenge plot line in the original film.
Well, I mean, there's a little, not so much revenge, but he is obsessed with the singer, and so that his motivation, his love for her, and being jealous of the others who try to court her and such, and he wants the best for her. So I mean, it's not revenge, but it is still kind of a twisted romance in the original, and in this one, this is where you could see a lot of the later versions borrowed from this versus the original. But for me in this one, it was fine. I guess I didn't feel quite like I did with the original Phantom. This one it was more of a drama with some thriller elements to it. But for me, it just doesn't quite do it. I've watched it a number of times, and just every time I watch it, I'm like, this is more of a standard 40s, more like drama thriller than a horror movie of what the original was really intended to be. So
Yeah. I've always thought the plot line of the revenge a little bit more motivated than just like I'm gonna take what I want and take who I want because that's just the way I'm written, I think. It makes him problematic today. Excuse me, makes him less problematic today and less of a like a creep, just like lusting after this woman who's they have real no relationship, and not that this seems to be any better, but it just felt like there was a more of a motivation for him to do what he's doing because of what was stolen from him, it influenced her to want to continue her own career, whereas before she's just a damsel in distress. And yes, she wants to have her own career, but I like the way the look of the original is, but I like the plot of the 43 version more.
yeah, and I'm just I guess it's the old guy in me. I don't know, but I do just enjoy the original more. I enjoyed this one just fine. I'm not saying that this film is by any means is a slouch, and it is interesting where they take the Phantom character. But for me, I like the Phantom character more shrouded in a little bit more mystery and being a little bit more, I guess, primal in his drive versus this one, which really makes a different case for his drive as far as like you said, revenge, which that's always a good plot device as well. So they both stand on their own, but for the two, if I had to watch them again, I'd watch the original before this one.
Well, Mark, thank you for joining me to talk about the 100th anniversary of the Phantom of the Opera, part one of this retrospective series. Where can people find you?
Specialmarkproductions.com. You can find links to all my stuff, my Patreon, my TikTok, my YouTube channel there. All kinds of links there. We've got archives for our podcast, The Spoiler Room, which I do. I just did a massive amount of interviews from a film fest I was at recently. And then I also have done a massive amount of reviews of the movies I saw at the film fest recently. So there's all kinds of new content up there. But yeah, specialmarkproductions.com. You go there. There's links from there to pretty much everything.
Awesome. And you can find me here on the Radio Horror channel on Sunday nights from 10 to 12, or here on the Radio Horror YouTube channel, or on my Facebook, Radio of Horror. Send me an email, radioofhorror@gmail.com. You can also pick up my book about horror filmmakers here in New England, independent horror filmmakers, called The New England Horror Filmmakers, or my most recent book, which just got published, called The New England Comic Book Store Owners. And I'll be back in a couple weeks with another part of this Phantom 100th Anniversary retrospective series covering the 1980s films here on Radio of Horror. Thank you, everyone.